काम करिए. Welcome back. You're here with the Axis My India Today exit poll, and we are now going to start building up to the battle for Bihar, because we're going to do it in a manner that's going to excite you. It's going to be step by step. This is T20 where you'll have to wait till the last over.
So what we'll do is we'll focus on who people want as chief minister, what are the key issues in this election, what's happening in each of the regions. Because as I said, neither Rajdeep nor I believe that an election is only about vote share and seat share. You have to understand what went into the election. And if you don't, then you go watch a shout fest. Because if you really want to understand Indian elections and politics, this is where you need to be.
So I'm going to do the first one, which is an interesting aspect, Rahul, because who will be the chief minister? We've been discussing whether state elections are increasingly about Kaun, Banega, Mukhyamantri. And that's what I'm going to do at the moment. Look at Kaun, Banega, Mukhyamantri. One of the questions on the Axis My India Today poll is, who is your preferred chief minister for Bihar? And this is what our survey says. Nitish Kumar, 15 years with a short interregnum when Majhi was chief minister, is 35%. That is Nitish Kumar. Sushil Kumar Modi, who's been his able deputy almost right through this period of the BJP, the finance minister, is just 3%. And look at this, 31-year-old Tejasvi Yadav has come out from the cold for 44%, almost written off after the devastating defeat that he suffered in the Lok Sabha. 44% are preferring the man who was deputy CM to Nitish between 2015 and 17. Tejasvi Yadav, Lalu Prasad ji, if he's watching us from a jail in Ranchi, or from the hospital where he is in Ranchi to be correct, the jail hospital, will look at these numbers and say, Mera beta, Papa kehte hain, bada naam karega. 44%.
So, Rajdeep, from the opinion poll that we did with CSDS, there is a 17% gap in this Axis My India post-poll study.
That's right, 27%.
From 27 to 44. Between Nitish and Tejasvi now, there is an 11% gap in popularity.
Yeah.
Nitish Kumar, after 3 terms in office, Manisha Priyam, now a hugely diminished man. So much so, and remember the criticism that Tejasvi Yadav had to deal with after the COVID? He was in a farmhouse, hardly campaigning. It's only in the last few months that he's gone in Bihar and campaigned. And he's now got almost half the voters in this post-poll study telling us they want Tejasvi as chief minister.
So the one important thing is, remember in the opening show I said Tejasvi was not present at the time of the COVID crisis. But there was such an acute critique of Nitish Kumar. What Bihar needed was an able leader who could have got its people's voice together. Nitish Kumar missing, and the moment the rally circuit has been done by Tejasvi Yadav and he's got his economic agenda in place, you found that he's got a left of center people's agenda, labor orientation, and he seems to be sweeping. And we will find...
We don't know whether he's sweeping. This is only preferred choice for chief minister.
44%.
This is only preferred choice for chief minister. So we
I
don't
withdraw
know
that word, but I would say that from a non-starter to get a 44% preference for chief ministerial seat, I think that's a huge number.
Let's get quick reactions to this. Javed Ansari, you've known Lalu Prasad. I mean, 44% for Tejasvi. Remember, Yadav Muslim is about 30%, the MY alliance, but he's 14% above that. So it's not just the MY alliance. If you purely look at these numbers, 44% suggests Tejasvi Yadav is getting support beyond the traditional Lalu vote as well.
Yes, and that's something which Lalu failed to do, and he is doing it. And if this indeed is true, then Manisha may have withdrawn her words, but I'll stick out my neck and say that they are romping home.
Wait, Karo.
Please, the numbers may not justify romping
Okay, they may not, but let me stick my neck out and say it based on what I've gathered from watching your channel, watching your reporters and other reporters, and from my sources on the ground. All anecdotal evidence points to the fact, and now buttressed by what this says, that RJT will win comfortably.
Javed's playing like this is a Diwali party. He's seen one card and he's going for a big one.
No, I haven't. From day one, that's been my position.
But here's the point.
That's been my position.
Here's the point. You've got Tejasvi with chemistry now backing him, Rahul. And you've got the caste arithmetic of the NDA. You've got the Kurmi, Kori, EBC vote bank that Nitish Kumar has so assiduously stitched. You've got the upper caste vote bank of the Bharatiya Janata Party with some of the Yadavs and some of the Dalits who vote for them. And therefore, after just the first data set Rajdeep put out, this is then very clearly a battle between the chemistry of Tejasvi Yadav versus the caste arithmetic of the NDA.
That's true, in a way, because Nitish Kumar is facing a 15-year anti-incumbency. But let's also be sort of like, know the electoral history of this country. There are only 3 people who have beaten the record of 15 years as a chief minister. It's very, very hard to win the 4th consecutive term. So,
but I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, no North Indian chief minister has gone beyond 15 years.
No, never.
Right?
Yeah.
The first chief minister of Bihar was for 14 years, I think. Mr. Singh, beyond that, there's never been a chief minister for as long as 15 years.
Yeah, that's
so
correct.
You're saying 15 years is a very long time.
Yes.
And it's fatigue, you think, more than anger? Is that what you're saying?
So both. I think there is anger. Let's not deny that in last 6 to 8 months, especially this anger has sort of like aggravated because of economic distress, migration crisis. All of these sort of added to it, and it added an attitude that our CM doesn't care about us.
Yeah.
I think that this is what this. So Nitish Kumar is a diminished man. And what Manisha ji was saying that, he had the image of Sushashan Babu, which is true. Like now, Nitish doesn't match up to his own image of a leader who was so loved and revered. He had a sort of like social arithmetic of just 8 or 10%.
And therefore, Rajat Sethi, will the BJP at some level start wondering, and listen carefully to what I'm saying because this will become a dominant theme over the next several days and weeks, did they make a mistake in not ditching Nitish Kumar? If they've ditched Nitish Kumar, if JDU, RJD had fought this election separately, BJP fighting by itself, because there's no anti-incumbency against the Prime Minister or against the BJP. The anti-incumbency is very squarely against Nitish Kumar.
Well, in my opinion, had this election been a referendum on Nitish Kumar, he would have lost. The NDA would have lost. But please understand that this election, which is fought by candidates also, Nitish was the face of one part of the alliance. There are other very important segments of the alliance. I don't foresee the NDA alliance faring so badly as Nitish would independently do. That's point number 1. Point number 2, though BJP carries that aspiration, the state unit, carries the aspiration to really dominate the politics of Bihar, but caste-wise, they haven't been able to break those class ceilings that are there. They haven't moved past what caste they have been representing in Bihar. So this is where, till they don't become a pan-caste, pan-Bihar party...
That's an interesting point. You're making an interesting point because, Rahul, I said this earlier, this is the one North Indian state where the BJP has never been the number 1 party. So, if you look at 2005, the BJP had 10.9% of the vote. So, till 15 years ago, then they came up over to 24.1%. Now, you see, but they've never crossed 30. Once you cross 30, then you can be party number 1 like you were in UP and get a majority on their own.
But they tried it in 2015.
But it's a very but I think you're making a very interesting point. Could, given these numbers that we are getting of Nitish's popularity, which is clearly low, Sandeep Shastri, taking off from what Rahul said, could the BJP actually have said just before the election, we are ditching Nitish Kumar, we will put up a face? Do you think that was possible?
Yeah.
I think it would have been too late in the day to do it. Having backed the government till the election, I think just before the election to take a stand would have been very difficult. I don't think having let down Nitish Kumar at that stage would have benefited them. I think the Gathbandhan had got its momentum and got its act together. So I think as Rahul said, from our CSDS poll to your poll, the difference that you see in the support for Tejasvi as a chief ministerial candidate, I would say is a direct byproduct of the campaign, of how this campaign panned out. Nitish remains more or less where he is, whereas Tejasvi has gone up, and I think that's a clear impact.
Urmila Thakur joins us from the RJD, Afzal Abbas from the Janata Dal United, Rohan Gupta from the Congress is still with us. Urmila Thakur, to you first. 44% popularity for Tejasvi Yadav. He's 31 years old. Till a few months ago, people in Bihar and outside were mocking him, saying, Lalu wali baat nahi hai is ladke mein. Now he's at 44% vote share, an 11% lead over Nitish Kumar. This young man, Could his time have come? That's the one question we'll know the answer to. But what do you make of these huge popularity figures?
अफजल अब्बास, आपको हमारी आवाज आ रही है? ये दिखा रहे हैं कि नीतीश कुमार हमारे पोल के अनुसार 35%, तेजस्वी 44%, अपनी पॉपुलैरिटी में, लोकप्रियता में 9% नीतीश जी के आगे गए हैं।
देखिए, जाहिर सी बात है, आपने सर्वे किया, देखा है, उसको मैं गलत कर सकता हूँ, सही आपका आकलन है, लेकिन जिस तरह से उन्होंने 10 लाख का शगुफा छोड़ा था, तो मैं समझता हूँ कि उसका भी असर आया होगा कि बच्चे नौजवानों में है कि हमारे साथ काम करें, 10 लाख नौकरी देंगे, तो इसका एक इम्पैक्ट पड़ा होगा, मैं समझता हूँ। लेकिन सबके बावजूद भी 35% आप दिखा रहे हैं नीतीश कुमार जी को, मैं समझता हूँ कि 35% मेरे हिसाब से कम है। बल्कि आपका सर्वे उसको मैं गलत नहीं कर सकता हूँ। ठीक है, तेजस्वी यूथ है, लेकिन 15 साल का इतिहास नीतीश कुमार जी का है।
The Congress is actually just getting lucky here, Rohan Gupta. You know, with very little effort of your own. I mean, you made some effort. We will have to give you that. But because of this huge popularity that started backing Tejasvi Yadav, your man now, your chief ministerial candidate, is the #1 choice for 44% of our respondents.
See, Rahul, if you see Bihar elections, because I have been there since beginning, there are 3 critical factors who have changed, like what you had the initial survey and what is showing it now. Number 1, the way BJP created a self-goal by promoting Chirag Paswan, that created confusion in minds of voters of JDU and BJP, whether Mr. Nitish Kumar is acceptable to BJP or not. There was a big question mark. And your poll only showed that 45 or 55% of the voter of BJP, they never trusted Mr. Nitish Kumar. And after this self-goal, that gap increased day by day. And what happened during that period, Tejasvi Yadavji and Congress Party, the whole alliance, we came out as a single product. There were no differences between Mahagathbandhan. The core issue was Berozgari. Before this pandemic, Tejasvi ji started the tour of Bihar, and this was the core issue. And let me tell you, the traditional so-called M+Y, which is Muslim and Yadav, it got converted into Mazdoor and youth, Mahila and youth. So people across the board, there is no caste. This is the first election in Bihar. They have not voted on caste, they have voted on issues.
You know, there is another element.
If you see the communication of the whole campaign.
Okay, so you're saying the Congress did the communication. The face is Tejasvi, the Congress does the communication. Fair enough, because I'm going through the list of the options for chief minister.
Absolutely.
And it's not just...
It is a joint communication.
No, 1 minute. It's 44%. Remember, I think it's interesting to note, 44% Tejasvi. It is 7% Chirag, who's fought this election on an anti-Nitish platform. 4% Upendra Kushwaha, who's also fought it on an anti-Nitish. So when you start adding up, it is clear that the anti-Nitish vote, or those who have campaigned on anti-Nitish vote, Rahul, is even higher than 44%. Yeah. So it's almost Nitish Kumar on one side and everyone else.
No, but it also shows you after 15 years, you know, you need to find some replace. People at the end of 15 years want badlav. They want change as far as the chief ministerial face is concerned. But Urmila joins us, Urmila Thakur from the RJD, and 44% popularity for Tejasvi Yadav. ये तो लग रहा है कि पहले हो रहा था कि टॉप 11 में खेलने को मिलेगा कि नहीं, है तो सीधे ही आके कप्तानी की नौक खेल के चले गए।
मुझसे पूछ रही हैं?
जी 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 जी, आप ही का तो उम्मीदवार अच्छा कर रहा है, और कौन हंसेगा? आप ही हंस रही है, बाकी तो परेशान हो रहे हैं 44% देख के।
जी, सबसे पहले तो मैं इस राज्य के 12 करोड़ जनता, आपके चैनल के माध्यम से मैं उनको धन्यवाद देती हूँ, जिन्होंने तेजस्वी यादव जी के नेतृत्व में बिहार में बदलाव के लिए आगे होकर के
सीट शेयर नहीं दिखाए हैं। ये तो सिर्फ ये है कि लोग सीएम किसको चाहते हैं। उर्मिला जी, इतना एक्साइटेड मत होइए, ये तो केवल वोट शेयर सीट शेयर है, पहला डेटा सेट है, अभी तो बहुत लंबी शाम है।
नहीं लंबी है, लेकिन बिहार में जो स्थिति है, बिहार के लोगों में जो कोरोना पॉजिटिव के टाइम से जो 40 लाख श्रमजीवी बिहार आए, और उन्होंने जो हजार किलोमीटर 1500 किलोमीटर का जो दूरी तय किए, कितने रास्ते में मर गए, कितने ट्रेन में मर गए, यहाँ आने के बाद जिनको बिहार सरकार से इंटरव्यू देने के लिए तैयार नहीं थी कि अगर ये लोग बिहार आएंगे तो चोरी डकैती बढ़ जाएगी, और अपने ही राज्य में वो प्रवासी कहलाने पे मजबूर हो गए, जिनको बिहार सरकार ने प्रवासी कहे कि प्रवासी मजदूर हैं। तो ऐसी स्थिति में जब वो आए तो लोग उनको रहने की व्यवस्था ने, खाने की व्यवस्था ने, इलाज की व्यवस्था, और 18 जिला में जो बाढ़ आया इस बीच में, उस बाढ़ के लिए भी न कोई केंद्र से विशेष पैकेज, न बिहार सरकार से कोई सहायता। लालू रसोई के द्वारा हमारे आदरणीय नेता, युवाओं के आइकॉन और बिहार के भावी मुख्यमंत्री, नेता प्रतिपक्ष तेजस्वी जी जिस तरह से बाढ़ पीड़ितों के बीच जाके सेवा करने का काम किए, उन
आपने एक शब्द यूज किया है जो कहीं ना कहीं कई लोग कह रहे हैं बिहार में, युवा नेता। You know, one of the interesting things is you've got a 31-year-old in a state with the largest youth population in the country and the highest unemployment. You see, you've got high unemployment, you've got a large youth population, migrant. एक मिनट मैडम, मैं आपकी बात ही मान रहा हूं कि जो युवा नेता आपने कहा, that is a factor.
But he's campaigned with purpose and energy. We've been listening to many of his speeches. He starts by saying, मैं boring पकाऊ भाषण नहीं दूंगा. He says that, you know, ये थका, he makes it seem as if Nitish Kumar and the government is tired, very, अब इनकी retirement का time आ गया, I am coming with energy and purpose. No. And the big message has been, my father gave you सामाजिक न्याय, social justice, I will give you economic justice. He broke Lalu's, everyone's campaigned and been on the campaign trail with Lalu. He tires you out because he's 10 places, 12 places. Tejasvi went to 17 rallies on one day.
And what I find very interesting about, so he's got the energy of a young person to do those 19 rallies. He never at any stage responded to the BJP or Modi. You know, he's not.
Or Nitish Kumar.
You know, Nitish Kumar, he was ready to attack. But he was not ready to, beyond a point, go for Mr. Modi. I think he realizes the Prime Minister's popularity is high. Nitish Kumar is my weakling, and I will localize the election. One of the interesting things, and this is a formula we saw with Soren, Hemant Soren in Jharkhand, that if you localize an election, if you make it about local issues, then the BJP becomes vulnerable, and this 10 lakh jobs. That is where I think
only one misstep, that Babu Sahib comment which irked the Rajputs
and he didn't get involved in Article 370 Ayodhya.
He kept away from that.
He just kept it on local issues.
So let's come to that now. This next question that we're putting up, and this will also give you a sense of how voters in Bihar are thinking, is about which issue mattered most. And remember, the issues that matter to a great extent play a role in determining voter behavior and your ultimate choice when you go out and cast your vote. Coming up on your screen now are the top issues for the voters of Bihar according to the exact poll done by Access My India. 42% of the respondents in our poll said development is what mattered most. But look out for number 2, unemployment at 30%. Jobs and joblessness in this election has been a bigger issue than it is in virtually any poll that we've seen. And various reasons for that. We had a pandemic, there was an economy that shut down, migrants came back, and remember the 30 lakh plus migrants who came back, each of them going to their own households, and when they do, the money that was coming back from the city stopped coming. It adds to the pall of gloom, and therefore there is a sense of negativity that builds, that things are not good, and this coming just before the assembly elections makes that a big issue. You've got inflation at 11%. Inflation is a key issue at this moment, but for some reason in Bihar, people don't feel the pinch. And I'm going to ask our experts why that's the case. You've got onion prices skyrocketing, vegetable prices skyrocketing, but it's not seen as a big issue. So clearly people aren't feeling the pinch. The Prime Minister in this election is at only 3%. So people clearly now have a different view for a Lok Sabha election, a different view for an assembly election. They don't merge.
This is the Prime Minister as a core issue. Whether you are voting for whether it's the number one issue. Prime Minister is not number one issue.
No, but people are saying this is not our issue. We've rewarded Prime Minister Modi. Yeah. We want him to run the centre. Sure. Yeah. We are not unhappy with what he is doing.
No, I'm just trying to tell for our viewers, I think the question is a direct question. What is the most important issue? So 30% are saying unemployment, 3% are saying Mr. Modi. So when you are asked to vote, you are voting for...
The reason this becomes important, Rajdeep, is that the BJP likes to believe, or at least it likes to project,
that you make it presidential.
That the Prime Minister can make them win anything.
Sure.
He can make you win a Lok Sabha election. The voters are wise. They was, boss, यहाँ पे तो ये CM का है ना election. Why you bring Modi ji into this?
Sir, Rahul, you know, in your numbers, 42% development, 30% unemployment, 72% हो गया, inflation, which your onion 11%, 83%. So 83% of the Bihar voter for whatever reason is unhappy. अब वो दुखी है, गुस्सा है, वो बात अलग है. But that's a very high number.
No, Rajdeep, going by this statistics, I don't remember any election which is fought 83% or only on economic issues.
That's right. So economic distress is very high. I think that is what we have to recognize.
This is the question number one.
Absolutely.
Can NDA solve or address that question, or RJD address the?
That's the next question.
That is the next, of course. That's what the data.
But would we agree, therefore, Rahul, that this election is distinctive? Because this is the first election being fought at times of a pandemic, where people, whether we like it or not, have lost jobs, where reverse migration, and Biharis are the largest group of migrants, it is inevitable that economic distress will be so dominant.
Yeah, and especially when the main opposition leader makes it the main election campaign plank.
And that's where
and it makes then harder for the incumbent, because you are already in the power. If there are economic issues, you should have solved it.
No, but I would like to say that the BJP tried to pitch in on the economic agenda also. Remember, there was the Prime Minister's huge cutouts. The entire Patna town had these bharosa usi par, जो जमीन से जुड़ा हो, लक्ष्य जिसका बड़ा हो. हमने आपको पीछे भी किसान सम्मान निधि दी, अब भी देंगे. But I think that shift away from Nitish Kumar onto a Prime Minister only, economic agenda only, came a bit later, by which time the first phase had been
Can I point
held.
out something, Javed?
So
and I want viewers to think about this very deeply. It's not just about what is the issue. Always go down the chart to see what is not an issue. And when you look at what is not the key driving issue, caste in a state as caste ridden as Bihar is at only 1%. Only for 1% of the voters in Bihar was caste the number one issue in determining who they wanted to vote for. So is this now, what does this mean? For a state like Bihar, where caste has been the dominant factor election after election. Also, national security only 1%. Yes, there are problems with China. There's an army amassed along the line of actual control. We have continuing problems with Pakistan. But that's not a key issue, only 1%. Because of Chief Minister Nitish Kumar, only 1%. So clearly, Javed, Nitish Kumar was so badly written off in this election that only 1% of the voters thought they will vote for who they will vote for because they wanted Nitish Kumar back.
Yeah.
Look, this is clearly an election where Mr. Nitish Kumar is being held to account. 15 years, everybody has a sell-by date, perhaps he's reached that. 2, the Prime Minister was not a candidate, so that was not a factor. And 3, and it's a very welcome development, because this perhaps is a blueprint, is a template which can be, if you focus on economic issues, on bread and butter issues. If it's a Rozgar elections, then all the other things, caste, communalism, whether it is
but can I be a little contrarian, Gavin? Can I be a little contrarian?
You can be contrarian provided you allow me to finish.
No, because you made your point. But
no, I was still making my point.
My point to you is different. You're saying you can contest this, and maybe Professor Shastri will support me. Is that yes, economic issues matter, but I think in COVID times the issue has got magnified. That's my point.
Yeah.
Look, Bihar has always had unemployment as an issue. It's not as if unemployment started.
But never this high.
You see, COVID floods. Please look at what Bihar has gone through in the last 1 year.
Yes.
Reverse migration. Now the question is, the Prime Minister's office and the centre made the effort giving 5 kilo rice and food grain per family, made the effort by giving 1,000 rupee grants the state government gave to migrant families. My question is, why have those direct benefits not given people a feeling that we would rather go with the double engine? That I am not certain. Maybe, Professor Shastri, do you agree with my theory that this election is getting magnified as the economic distress election because it's being fought in COVID times? In a state like Bihar, a state of the poor, if I may be allowed to use that word, they are a state where you have a large number of districts which are well below the poverty line. And then you hit with COVID, unemployment, it's a killer.
Rajdeep, I would agree with your point partly that this election is seeing economic issues in the backdrop of COVID. But to add to that, I would say no election is a single election issue. There are a range of issues here. The economic hardships people face, the leadership at the state level not being seen as being proactive, the opposition leader seizing the opportunity and focusing on the right set of issues. I think it's a combination of this which has made this election in Bihar look to be an election which brings economic issues to the forefront. I think economic issues, in a sense, are also becoming the mask for expressing various other forms of dissent, including unhappiness with a government and its leadership, which has been in power for 20 years.
Can I just say, and Sanju Verma joins us from the BJP representing the NDA on this broadcast, that the NDA went in with all decks stacked against them. You know, you have a 15-year government. After 15 years, it's very difficult to carry the same kind of enthusiasm a new candidate would. We've gone in the middle of a pandemic. We've gone in the middle of massive mass migration, which impacted 30 lakh plus families. 30 lakh people came back. So roughly 30 lakh people were impacted directly, and their entire families were targeted. And you're in the middle of an economic downturn and huge joblessness. So electorally speaking, the decks were really stacked. The fact that the BJP and the NDA have still been in the fight for a long part of this campaign shows their strength. The fact that they, you know, till the end people thought, hange, phasa hua hai. Nobody thought, okay, they're losing despite so many odds being stacked against them.
I am now going to again play contrarian.
Let her answer.
Okay, let her answer. Then I'll play contrarian. Answer. Ma'am, go ahead.
I don't think she can hear us.
She can't hear us.
No, you speak that.
Okay.
Yeah, can you please repeat?
Yeah, please repeat your question, Rahul. Go ahead.
Sanju Verma, what's your sense of all the numbers that you've seen so far?
Yeah.
The first data set we had, Tejaswi doing really well, 44 versus 35. In the next, we've seen unemployment and development be big issues. It seems to suggest that the odds are stacking up against the NDA in the exit poll so far.
You know, Rahul, I have been listening to you and Rajdeep before coming on the debate. And first of all, I would like to say that whether you look at Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh or Uttar Pradesh, the bipolls, if they are a precursor of things to come about what the mood of the nation is with respect to the larger agenda in terms of development policies of the Modi government, then clearly we've delivered. We are about to get 6 to 8 seats in Gujarat, you know, again between 6 to 8 in Uttar Pradesh. And look at, you know, even Madhya Pradesh, with a 46% vote share, we might get between 16 to 18 seats, whereas with a 43% vote share, Congress is still not likely to get more than 10 to 11 seats, which means they're not able to translate vote share into the requisite number of seats, which I think is the moot point about how Congress has repeatedly failed to translate vote shares into the winning combination. Now, having said that, let me come straight to Bihar, which is the topic of discussion today. You know, Rajdeep spoke and gave out some numbers with respect to how it has the highest percentage of youth population and the highest unemployment rate. Let me tell you, it's very easy to give generic figures. But why is nobody talking about the fact that if you look at many of the social indicators, I will come to the economic indicators later because economics is my subject and my domain area of expertise. Social indicators, the literacy rate prior to 2005 when Nitish Kumar came at the helm of affairs was just 47%. Today that's 62%. Even in Muslim-dominated area like Simanchal, where you know Kishanganj has a 68% Muslim population, let me tell you that prior to 2005, the literacy rate was less than 10%. It was in single digits. And today the literacy rate is 54%, which may not be great in absolute terms.
Ma'am, I'm sorry to intervene. No one doubts, Sanju ji.
Let me tell you one more thing.
Ma'am, 1 minute. No one doubts Nitish ji's achievements on the social indicator. But we are talking of an election in 2020 in a pandemic where economic distress by all accounts is a major issue. And the fact is, in our survey, between development, unemployment and inflation, 83% are saying these are the top issues. So between onion prices, between unemployment and between the visible lack of development, when bridges start collapsing within days of being inaugurated, people are saying, kya hua? You know, you've been flooded, you've had a flood. No one is saying it's easy. But why not accept that this is an election taking place under economic distress? How long are you going to live in denial that the country is not going through tough economic times?
Rajdeep ji, now you laid out so many statistics for the benefit of your audience. Give me just half the time that you took to lay out the numbers in front of me. I want to tell you one thing very clearly. This whole talk about India going through economic distress and isolation, I'm sorry for the language, is a lot of gibberish and hogwash. I admit we degrew, we contracted by 23.9% in terms of GDP in the June 2020 quarter. But why is no one talking about the fact that 50% plus of India's workforce is directly and indirectly dependent on agriculture, which grew by 3.4% in the June quarter and by 5.9% in the March quarter. And India is the only economy which has agriculture to fall back on. It is the only economy which has agriculture as a backbone to fall back on. But why are you interrupting me? Did I interrupt you? Let me tell you, you spoke about falling bridges. Between 1947 and 2005, the Congress RJD, do you know how many bridges they built over the Ganga? 16, and you can check this on Google. Today there are more than 41 bridges.
Ma'am, I am talking about none of what you are saying I disagree with.
Let me tell you.
I am saying we are in 2020. We are trying to find it, ma'am. We are trying to find an explanation. Okay, you give me an explanation, ma'am. Very quickly, ma'am. We have many guests. I am asking. We have many guests. We have many guests. I am asking you a simple explanation. What explains Nitish Kumar's falling popularity? Straight answer. He's at an all-time low. Something must have gone wrong.
The straight answer is, Rajdeep, you know, it's always how you perceive things, either as the glass half full or glass half empty. In case of BJP, I'm sorry I'm not getting personal, but you always believe in seeing the glass as half empty. Let me ask you a question. With a 15-year anti-incumbency that he's staring at, if 35% people still say they want to see him as chief minister, I actually think that's great news.
Okay, can I present a contrarian perspective to respond to the question that Rajdeep
A person who himself is not educated is saying, I will open AIMS and IITs. Excuse me, you need to lead by example. जो खुद 9वीं फेल है, वो बड़े-बड़े भाषण तो दे सकता है. What does he know about education? Tell me honestly. Don't leaders need to lead by example? We have Nitish Kumar, who's an engineer. Why aren't you talking about his credentials?
So here's the point that I think that we need to consider while analyzing the data. And that point is this, that a lot of the good work that Nitish Kumar did was factored in as a given. The fact that he provided bijli, sadak, pani, people took, because this is a very young generation in Bihar. They said, what next? Their aspirations rose. They wanted economic development. They wanted industry. That is where he failed, because if you see the same data set, corruption, which could in some elections become a very big issue, is important only for 1% of the voters, which means nobody thought corruption was an issue. Obviously, they didn't feel the pinch, which is why it's not an issue for them. Similarly, a lot of the work that was done, like law and order, only 1%. What does that mean? That nobody felt the pinch. If they were feeling the pinch, it would have been a big issue. It wasn't. Which suggests that a lot of the good work that he did in, relatively speaking, fixing law and order in the state of Bihar was kind of factored in.